Oklahoma's transfer portal with Mateer and Ott and others. They have gotten some of the better names that were available. Josh McCuistion of Soonerscoop.com joins me. David Smoke along with Craig Smoke on 365 Sports. Josh, obviously, I don't want to talk about a clock is ticking or hot seat or whatever, but my God, if Oklahoma doesn't turn the corner, right, this could be where they kind of not fall into oblivion, but they just become another program. How critical is this specific offseason?
I think it's huge for Oklahoma. I don't think there's any doubt, David. You look at it and you can look back to the 2 years ago when OU goes 10-3 and they have a pretty solid year. And we're actually quite close to making it to the Big 12 title game and kind of having a rematch with Texas after that classic at the Cotton Bowl. But, you look at how they lost. They lost to Kansas. There were some rain delays. They didn't play very well. Then the next week they go and play Oklahoma State. And again, just, it was a good Oklahoma State team, but they didn't play very well. And there's this feeling like, well, okay, Oklahoma didn't understand the measure of the SEC. And I don't really think that's fair. I think Oklahoma lost a ton of offensive linemen coming out of that final year of the Big 12. But when you say that, you're like, well, they must have closed really strong in the Big 12. They didn't. I mean, the first 2 years under Brent Venables, there were 10 losses. I mean, so you're just kind of like, at some point, I think Brent Venables is a great recruiter. I think the fan base wants to believe in him. I think whether they do believe in him is a question mark, but they want to buy in. They like him as a human being. They like what he stands for. But at some point, it's Oklahoma. You got to show something or something's got to give.
Josh, they got to win, as you mentioned, but, man, they've been feeding you guys a nice fat batch of stories this offseason, huh? I mean, Nagy and Mateer and Ott and, just on and on and on. What's it been like just seeing how, much they've just been attacking everything, it seems like? What have they not attacked, if anything?
Well, guys, the crazy thing is you look at it from the moment he arrived, and Brent Venables is, very much we want to develop. We want to be a program that's about, year over year. We don't want a lot of portal chaos like that. I think like most teams, they'd like to have 6-7 guys kind of, cutting the back end of the roster, and hopefully they're adding more to it. But you look at it, there's only 1 year there hasn't been some quarterback chaos for Oklahoma. That first year when Brent comes in, Caleb Williams goes to USC, Oklahoma brings in Dillon Gabriel right as the buzzer expires, basically. I mean, he was literally 24 hours away from being unavailable to Oklahoma. And then, you kind of have the second year heading into Gabriel. We're like, okay, that's set. And then the next year, Dillon Gabriel's kind of said, hey, they think he's going to go pro. Jackson Arnold's the guy they expect to be their guy. The chaos of last year. And now you head into this year with a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator who is Brent Venables, a new quarterback. You just look at it and it's like, man, this has not been what Brent Venables wanted. It hasn't been. He wanted his staff to be locked in and be very much like the Clemson model where guys just stay and stay and stay. And that hasn't been what's happened due to, some guys having success and moving on. Jeff Levy taking the Mississippi State head job. You look at Zach Alley taking the West Virginia job, working with Rich Rodriguez, who he had some time with. And then, you have the abomination that was Oklahoma's offense and things having to change. So, again, it hasn't been boring covering Oklahoma for the last 4 years.
What's the fan temperature besides frustrated? You see now with what their number one rival, Texas, is like on an absolute heater. What is the temperature in Norman?
Well, it's so funny, David, and I get OU fans that remind me of this all the time. While Texas was down, struggling, whatever you want to say, for so long I was like, guys, a good Texas makes Oklahoma better. They need to have somebody pushing them. And I think that was true in the Big 12, where it was really Oklahoma and Texas. And then again, you had the great years for Baylor, TCU had several great years, but from a national perspective for Oklahoma to make a 4-team playoff, it helped them if Texas was a top 10 win rather than, they went 7-5 and maybe made the Alamo Bowl. That didn't give Oklahoma the bounce they were looking for. And I think it let Oklahoma fall asleep a little bit. I think that's why you had those lopsided teams under Lincoln Riley that were great offensively, but just couldn't play a lick of defense. So I think like I said a second ago, the fans want to believe in Brent Venables, and I think they love the Jim Nagy thing. I think that's really been well received, and you look at some of the additions they've made. The Jaden Ott kid from Cal, I think everybody is rightly really excited about. I think people look at his numbers from last year and kind of forget he was a 1,400-yard sophomore in the Pac-12 and was a guy that most people thought was going to be in this year's draft. So I think Oklahoma kind of fell under a lucky star to get him. But I mean, it is like, I think there is if this team, and against this schedule, this saying Oklahoma needs to go 8-4 sounds like, well, that's the expectation. You look at this schedule, they've got 7 top 25 teams on this schedule. It's a murderer's row. And if they can go 8-4 and show some growth, and, and there's a sign that maybe John Mateer returns for 26, that 26 Oklahoma team with a new schedule, maybe softening a little bit, could look like a very different team than what we're talking about right now. But they've got to find a way to get through 25.
Josh, what was it like to see them march through an SEC schedule? I mean, obviously fresh teams, fresh locations, bigger venues, things like that. We know they ruled the roost for the longest time there in the Big 12. So what was that like to just see a change of scenery, and how much did that inject a different type of energy?
It really was. The fan base, you could tell, enjoyed the new atmospheres, even in Norman, the new presence of like, oh, okay, Alabama rolled out in huge numbers, or, whoever it was, Tennessee, when they descended for that first SEC game. Like, there really was a different feel amongst the fan base. And I thought it made the home environment better, even though Oklahoma didn't give the fans a lot to cheer about for much of last year. That South Carolina game was a slog. It was over late first quarter. That game was already dead because Oklahoma couldn't score any points. So, I do. It was fun. And, the first year you get to go down to Ole Miss and see the Grove and some of that stuff. And I can speak for some of our staff. They enjoyed the Grove quite a little bit. So, it was a cool environment. I mean, from a guy who covers it and has to deal with fans day in and day out, you wish they didn't have to be so sad about every moment that was last year. But it was, if you can take that part out of it, it was an amazing experience. It was much of what you come to expect from the SEC.
All right, so let's put OU back in that area, not the time period where they won the national title or when they threatened, but let's just go back to where they still, from 2010 until they left, there were a lot of years they won it. K-State had their moment, Oklahoma State, Baylor, TCU, but how would you, if you put them in that level and you put them in the SEC today, where would they compete? And is the SEC, now that you've seen it for a year, as daunting and as big as you hear, or not?
It's an interesting thing, because if you're talking to me about like Oklahoma could have, the years of like Baker or Kyler or so, like those teams that, like I was talking about earlier, we're lopsided. We're great offensively. They're going to be in every game. Just because, like, you can go back to that 2017 team who was one of the worst defenses you'll ever see. But people forget that team went to Ohio State and won that year and played decent defensively doing it. And that wasn't a great Ohio State team, but I don't care. You go into Columbus and win, you've done something. Now, and then, goes to the Rose Bowl and fights Georgia tooth and nail and puts up 40 on Georgia, who, we all know what they're putting out defensively. So, again, that team would compete, but they'd fall short, just like those teams did when they ran into SEC teams. When you run into Nick Saban, when you run into other teams who may not be as proficient as you are on offense, but they're going to make you sweat a little bit when you've got the ball. Because that was, I mean, guys, we know, I mean, for several years there under Riley, Oklahoma would just name your number. Like, what do you want to hit? And they'll go score because they had, CeeDee Lamb, Kyler Murray, Hollywood Brown, like all these explosive playmakers, and they had a good trigger man. Like, there's not a lot that, Big 12 defenses were going to deal with. But you look at the SEC, and to me, the thing that I will say, and I think last year I didn't think the SEC was what we're accustomed to seeing, and I think you're seeing that around college football. I don't think the great teams are as great as they were a few years ago, and people can hate the portal and hate NIL. I think that's helped. I think it's leveled the field in a lot of ways where 3 or 4, I guess maybe 5 years ago, there were about 4 or 5 teams that legitimately had a chance to win a national title. Now there's 10, like 12 maybe at this point in the year that could really make that run if things fall right. And I think it's just because guys now, like you don't have to go to these schools to, make money. Let's be honest. That was happening long before NIL existed. You don't have to go to those places, and you can go, like, guys don't want to sit around and wait to be the third string guy at Georgia when they can go be the starter at, Kentucky or Oklahoma. I mean, whatever it may be, you can move around and make those choices for yourself. I will say last year in the SEC, the wake-up call for Oklahoma fans, the defensive line play, it's unparalleled. Like, I mean, Oklahoma picked about the worst possible moment in history to be as bad as they've been on offensive line in 20 years. Like, I mean, they were terrible last year, and they faced, I think, something like 6 first-round picks along the defensive line, not to mention all the second, third, fourth rounders that were mixed in around the rest of the SEC. So, terrible timing, but quarterback play was poor. I mean, poor. When you look around the league, like Ole Miss should have run away from Oklahoma. And again, Jackson Dart was a first rounder, maybe the best quarterback in the league. And you're like, well, okay. Like it didn't wow you coming from the Big 12 where we'd seen all these guys that could just sling it all over the yard for, more than a decade.
Josh, we saw that story come out this week with Texas and the reported figures of their roster. I know there's been a lot to do about how accurate that is or not. I saw it and I'm like, first of all, I don't know why people are still, I guess we're just so conditioned to go like, oh, we're not paying that much money. And it's like, it's okay, guys. You can pay whatever you want to. But I also didn't really scoff when I saw that figure like some people. I was just like, well, I don't know. I could totally see it if you're adding in house settlement and all this, whatever else. Your thoughts on that story, and is that surprising to you that money like that's being doled out? And where do you think Oklahoma falls in line with all of that?
40 seems a little high to me, if that's what we're talking about. But like 30s, absolutely can believe that. No, I don't think there's any question. Because, I mean, the thing that people forget is Texas is one of those few programs that's playing with a different level of money than everybody else. Like Ohio State's in that conference. Like there's a few schools, Oregon, like they just have more than everybody else does. And you have to live with that. And it's they keep talking about NFL model. It reminds me in a lot of ways of baseball. Like, you've got money. Can you be smart enough to maximize what resources you do have? Because I don't know if we're ever going to get to a level where it's truly a salary capped, it's balanced, it's fair. Because I don't think, it's going to be really hard to get rid of collectives and those things. Now, early on in NIL, I thought there were twofold problems for Oklahoma. I thought at first they didn't have it organized. They weren't running it very well. I think they were very concerned about, like, we're going to overcommit to this, and then the NCAA is going to come down and make rules and change things, and then we're going to be left kind of stranded. The second thing, I don't think Brent Venables wanted it to be this way. I think he was very Dabo Swinney-esque, where it's just like, well, no, we don't want to be that kind of program. That's the kind of program you have to be if you want to compete at this level. And I think Oklahoma was slow to accept that. And I still think there is a kind of like what you're talking about, where there's this idea of like, well, that's wrong. We shouldn't do that. No, that's okay now. Like, we can talk about it. It's out in the open. Everybody knows it's happening. Like, and there are big money corporate sponsors that are more than willing to help Arch Manning or, be part of whatever you want to do. So I think that's the thing. Coaches in a lot of ways are having to break that mindset, not just of like it happens, because they all knew it happened, but like, it's okay. Like, this is okay. You can embrace this.
Yeah. And, Oklahoma, there was a comment from Greg Byrne at Alabama. He said, if anyone thinks, and this is Alabama, if anyone thinks we're going to be able to just kind of just keep this up, even like we're not just loaded. We've got money, but not loaded, as you mentioned, the Texas, Ohio State, and a few others have. Did that surprise you when you even heard Alabama say that? Because if Alabama says that, then yeah, someone like Oklahoma probably is in the same boat.
I can tell you that the OU fans are like sitting there screaming at me, because this is something I've said all along. This idea that college donors are going to be able to shill out $40 million every year with no return on their investment. People are like, well, NFL owners do it. First of all, NFL owners are billionaires, and they see some of their money come back. They get it through ticket sales. They get it through revenue. These guys are giving money. It's not even a charitable donation. This is just money they are lighting on fire. And these aren't billionaires. These are millionaires. These are successful attorneys, car dealers. Like, these are not guys just with limitless cash, at least like in the terms of these kind of dollars and cents. Like, that's just not the way these work. These are tiny little college towns for the most part that don't have those kind of businesses in place to restore them, to every year refill the coffers. So I think that is absolutely something people have to accept. This will change. Like, they are hitting a wall. What I think is going to be interesting is, can the many curtail the few? Can they get it to where there really is a salary cap for 97% of the programs in the country who want one? Obviously, I understand that Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, they're like, no, we want free market, because they can outspend everybody for eternity. Like that's the nature of those systems. So I wonder, can the good rule the few? And that's going to be, I think, to me, that's the question of what this all comes down to when finally we face some of the things. I'm one that, like, you got to make these guys employees. Like, that's the only way you're ever going to get anything done. You've got to have collective bargaining. Like, you're going to have, and I know people hate that. They like, because it's a change. Like, I get it. And we've seen so many changes in college football, but the only way you get this under control and get some of the transfer portal where guys are in the portal 4 straight years, like, you've got to have some contractual obligation from their side as well as yours.
Yeah, and or signing on a Saturday morning NIL deal and a transfer, and then 6 to 10 hours later you might sign another one, and that's got to be something that is buttoned up a little bit. We've mentioned Mateer and Ott and others, and maybe not even a transfer. Josh, give me a name or two of a player, no matter the position, that you think is a breakout season waiting to happen.
The guy I would start with, and I think some know him pretty well at this point, but I would say Nash, like, he's a guy that could end up on All-American lists by the end of the year. And that's Jaden Jackson, the sophomore defensive tackle, guy they got from IMG Academy. And the great story about Jaden is he was the +1 of his IMG recruiting class, because Oklahoma also got David Stone, the big 5-star that everybody in the country wanted, was an Oklahoma kid that OU had been recruiting since he was a freshman. And Jaden was a guy that, I mean, he's like 6'1", 300 pounds. He's not the guy that you walk in and are like, well, that's the guy. That's the, unbelievable player. Jaden Jackson started game 1 last year for Oklahoma on a pretty good OU defense. And that defensive line, I think, is going to be a real equalizer for Oklahoma next year, where they've lost Danny Stutzman. They've lost Billy Bowman. They've lost a lot of leadership. But you return, I mean, people don't think about this. Jaden was a freshman All-American. I think he's going to have another huge year. R. Mason Thomas was one of the top sack guys in the country, and I think 5th in the SEC last year with like 9.5 sacks. So you've got some pieces up front that we're not accustomed to seeing at Oklahoma. And you throw in, Dominic Williams, who obviously was a big portal win last year for Oklahoma from TCU, and you just go down the roster. I mean, guys, they're too deep across the front. And I can't think of a time. I mean, in some cases, they've got 3 guys. I can't think of a time since early Bob Stoops era where I could say the same. And, then those days you're talking the Tommy Harrises, the Gerald McCoys, the Dusty Dvoraceks, all these great players along the front for Oklahoma. So they're going to buy Oklahoma's back seven a little time to grow. On the offensive side of the ball, the guy that I would have said, it's going to be interesting to see, Javonte Gibson was a transfer they got in and from Arkansas Pine Bluff, was small school guy, put up like 1,500 yards though last year, and he was the talk of camp. Like everybody was just raving about the kid, that this guy's going to be special. He's like 6'2", 215. He's got NFL, all the physical traits you're looking for. One of the last practices of the year, like I think the second to last, he breaks a bone in his leg and is down. Now, the early reports are they think he's going to be back. He'll miss summer workouts and that kind of stuff, but they'll think he'll be back pretty early in the year. And if he can get back to even 85% of the rumors we were hearing, I mean, that's a difference maker for Oklahoma. And we saw last year, they need it in the pass game.
Hey, man, thanks for getting up early with us. Not that you got up any earlier, but a little bit earlier than we normally are. Josh, great to have you on the show. Thank you.
Hey, anytime, guys.
Thank you. Josh McCuistion, SoonerScoop.com with us